for the last couple of years of releases of Nox, I have written zero code for that project. All I do is write the release notes. And in fact, the last release, I didn't even write the release notes. I finally gave that up to another contributor. That was the only thing I was holding on to. And it's empower your community, because if you do, they'll be able to take things in directions and broaden the project in a way that you never, ever expected. Hello, and welcome to the Open Hardware Manufacturing Podcast, the podcast about making open source hardware. Today, I'm joined by Lucy.
Hey.
And I'm Thea Flowers, everyone's favorite substitute teacher.
And for those of you wondering where Steven is, don't worry, he is okay and safe. He is just a little comatose recovering from Open Sauce 2025.
Yeah, he went without us, so we're doing the podcast without him.
Yeah, it's only fair.
Today's topic is why collaboration is at the heart of open source, especially in hardware. While Lucy and I had a rough outline for this episode, it sort of got away from us a little bit. But I still think we talked about some incredible stuff, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Yeah, this was a really fun record. It was great chatting with you. I look forward to us doing the the feature again next time.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So on this week's podcast, we are going to talk about collaboration in open source. What does it mean to collaborate on an open source project? What is it like to build things with other people? And what are the cool things that we've seen there? What are the not cool things we've seen there? And what are some projects that we're really happy to have participated in? So before we jump into that specifically, I would love for Lucy to tell me more about her background in open source and some of the cool projects that you've been involved in.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. I got started in open source and became aware of it through, weirdly enough, the Nerf blaster community.
Nerf blasters?
Yeah. And it was open source in a different sense than what we think of today, I would say. It was people that would share what they did to these stock Nerf blasters and document their upgrades and performance guides. And it was really fun. It was very much an arms race and the Manhattan Project-esque thing where people are just trying to...
A foam dart arms race?
Yeah, people are just trying to work together collaboratively to figure out how to make these blasters work the best.
So yeah, that sounds very DIY, punk rock aesthetic.
Oh yeah, big time. And it eventually led to people doing fully 3D printed blasters and sharing their step files, their Fusion 360 design files, and having to talk about licenses amongst each other. And it's been a really cool thing to watch blossom and more in line with what we think of as open source hardware today.
That's really cool.
Oh, sure. Aside that, Nerf led me into RepRap and Voron.
Awesome.
I got started in 3D printing in 2011 with a MakerBot Rep 1.
Oh my God.
There's so many upgrades you could do to that thing because it comes out of the box okay. But the more you modify it, the better. And it basically ran Marlin, but you could put Sailfish on it and customize it even further. It was super fun. And then that led me into building rep wraps like the Theme CNC, Rostock Max V2, some various wooden Prusa kits. And fast forward today, I help lead Opulo, and you could basically say I'm the lead designer for the LumenPnP pick and place machine. And that's been a lot of fun.
We could basically say that. We could.
Yeah, I get CAD contributions from others here and there, but I don't touch electronics there or firmware. I'm just the CAD monkey.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
a lot of really cool stuff there. It seems so the big difference between you and me is I came very much from software open source before ever touching hardware open source. So my background is I started programming very young. So my first interaction with open source was Linux and KDE and all of that stuff. And I was blown away that I could just look at the source code for all this stuff and figure out how it works. So I very much owe my skill set as a programmer to being able to read the source code of this stuff. I owe it to open source. And that's led me to a lot of open source in my life and career, from sort sort of those early days of just, exploring Linux to contributing to things like KDE and eventually contributing to Cake PHP. And then I got into Python really hard and did a lot of work with Python packaging and then all kinds of cool open source stuff when I was at Google. And then I got into open hardware and I had an open hardware synthesizer company and got into 3D printing with Vorons and all that stuff. So yeah, it's gone a little off the rails for me, but
just a little bit.
Yeah, I've been able to do kind of a wild tour of a bunch of different kind of open source projects, which has been really fun. So
yeah, I try to build a different open source project at least once a year. It's something like unrelated to what I do professionally. It's super fun to keep up with, like keyboards or open source headphones. I know Steven just built the Flexure microscope. That thing was kick butt.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a really cool project. Yeah. So for our listeners, the Open Flexure microscope is a microscope that you can 3D print and build. It needs some mechanical parts too, but it's able to move like extremely accurately to let you do all kinds of really, really cool microscopy. I can't say that word.
You got there.
I got there. Yeah. But it's really awesome. So yeah. And the project is open source and it's really cool. It's like the documentation is great. The people who do it are great.
Yeah. And for today, like we really wanted to drill down into like why collaboration is at the heart of open source, especially in hardware. Not limited to hardware, but I think the collaboration to me is my favorite aspect of open source. There's obviously like the philosophies around intellectual property and the sharing of ideas, but I take great joy in the community aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, open source is such a broad term now that it can mean all kinds of things, right? So like we specifically want to talk about what are the different collaboration models, right? Like there are some open source projects that have zero collaboration with anyone else, right? Like there's projects like SQLite that have an extremely insular team. I think it's a handful of people at most. And they don't accept any outside contributions. You can download the source and you're free to do whatever you want to with it under the open source license, but they don't accept contributions. They don't really collaborate with anyone. And that's really interesting, but it is also kind of like not what excites me about open source. Not saying that SQLite's not exciting. It's really cool, but I get excited about a project because I get to work with people. And we want to talk a lot about like, how do these people do this, right? Like some projects build entirely in the open and it's completely community driven. Some projects have a benevolent dictator for life that guides the project with a strong hand. And, there's all kinds of things in between. So
yeah, and I've noticed at scale, it can get really not convoluted, but multidimensional and complicated.
Yeah. You look at a project like the Linux kernel that has tiers, like multiple levels of contributors, because you don't just submit a patch to Linus to review, right? Like you have to, like you submit it to someone who's like in charge of that area of the kernel, and then they eventually submit it to Linus. It's wild. Scaling any of this is complicated. Scale changes everything, right?
Yeah, I remember when the LumenPnP project became somewhat commercialized, in a sense, through Opulo, it changed fundamentally, like how...
Yeah, when you started selling.
Yeah.
It, right?
A totally different lens of viewing open source when there's a company backing an open source project.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. Like, how much does that change the calculus of like what you open source and how you open source it, right? Mm-hmm. Like whatever money's involved, things get interesting. Whereas a lot of open source is just someone who wanted to do something in their free time, and the monetary part of it isn't a factor. But that's not always the case.
I cherish the open source projects that like have no fiscal reason to exist, and it's just like a labor of love for people. Those are always so cute and fun.
Yeah, they are. They're fantastic. Let's start with, how about some projects that you've seen have really compelling community engagement and collaboration models? Can you think of any off the top of your head that like really, really excite you in terms of like, oh yeah, like the way that they interact with the community and do collaboration is really cool?
There's so many good answers to this. I think this might be controversial, but an early frontrunner to me stands out as Arduino. Like they were real good about sharing their schematics, sharing how to make a shield, and like getting people to make whatever types of accessories they wanted for that platform.
Yeah, I mean, I look at open hardware and like it's very easy to trace back a lot of it to Arduino, right? Like I mean, like, I'm not saying they started the whole thing, but like they were a huge, massive player in putting momentum behind open hardware. And you're right, like having the schematics available, having like all of the specs open source, and having the like, I think what was really compelling about Arduino is like having the platform itself, like the SDK, like basically open source was incredible, especially compared to like at the time, MCU manufacturers distributing some awful SDK that only ran on Windows XP or something, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the openness of Arduino was really, really interesting, and how they didn't really like try to put up any kind of walled garden around their stuff. They basically said, here's what we're making if y'all want to get in on this. And people got in on it. It was really cool.
Was there much, this is a little bit before my time, so I don't have great visibility into it, but like, did they accept contributions to like the Uno design or like the Mega?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I could not tell you. I do know that like, obviously like a lot of the Arduino derivatives had a lot of impact in like what they decided to build next, right? Like, I mean, basically for every like, main Arduino, like official Arduino, like there is always some like, series of like variations on a theme where like they integrate some extra feature or make the whole thing smaller, right? Like, like we saw with like the Pro Micro, right? Where it's like, the tiniest little thing. So yeah, like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, you built an ecosystem. You didn't build, like Arduino didn't build a product. There's not an Arduino. Like there's not just one of them, right? They built an entire ecosystem, and they did that by like letting the community kind of like run away with a bunch of stuff, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it really led the way for 3D printers to like jump off from that, because people would be making shields for the Mega, like the Ramps shield, for example.
Yeah, the Ramps shield, like that is really cool. For those of you who don't know what the Ramps shield is it's basically like a backpack for an Arduino that kind of made early 3D printing like a reality, right? Like
it really gave people a starting point of like, hey, I have these stepper motors, I want to move them, and I have this controller that can talk to my computer. How do I bridge the two? And the Ramps board is like, I got you.
Yeah. It made it really easy, because you didn't have to like design a whole custom PCB. Because like back in the day, there wasn't Big Tree Tech making 3D printer control boards, right? Like it was you gotta cobble something together yourself. So like with the Ramps, you could get an Arduino, one of the big old ones, and then you could stick this Ramps shield on top of it. And then on top of the Ramps shield, you could put in the stepper drivers. So it's kind of like Legos to build your own little 3D printer control board that you didn't have to like sit there and like figure out how to make a schematic in a PCB to control some motors, right?
And what I loved in that is how approachable it made open hardware. I always think like a child and their parent could put together a rep kit without knowing what the schematic of these circuit boards is, because the community's done such a stellar job of making it accessible and documented.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge, right? Like when you're making a project, when you're making especially something like an open hardware project where it's something people will physically use, right? I think there's a very compelling case to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, because the more hands that are touching it, the more those people are going to be like, oh, like here's a weird thing I ran into, so like they can help other people get up to speed, right? Like that sort of like that collaboration is going to happen whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Which is really great.
For sure. What's the hardware project that comes to mind for you, Thea?
It's hard to say with hardware, but with hardware, like when I was first like kind of getting into things, like I found the community around keyboards, like mechanical keyboards, really, really interesting, mostly because of like QMK, which is a firmware that runs on custom mechanical keyboards. I think it means quantum mechanical keyboard or something like that. But it's open source, and everyone shares their configuration files for it. Everyone's weird, super specific keyboard, like you can go and look at basically everyone's configuration for it, which is kind of wild. And like when I was doing this research and like deciding to build my own keyboard, like it was so cool to like see like just the work of so many other people like here, like in one spot where I'm just like, oh, like this is super cool. It's gotten even better now. Like there's all kinds of really, really cool stuff that you can do with custom keyboards these days. I was initially blown away by like QMK and like how many open source keyboard designs there were. And like there are designs that only require you to have a Pro Micro, some wires and some diodes and a couple switches, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you can get into it with practically nothing. And it's incredible. Like you can go so far from there. Another one that I think about a lot is this project in the synthesizer world called Ornament and Crime. And this is gonna be very niche. So like when I did synthesizer stuff, when I had my open source synthesizer business, I was doing synthesizer modules, which like you think about a synthesizer, you think about it like a piano looking thing that makes funny sounds. That is a synthesizer. There's other kinds of synthesizers though. There's those that are called modular synthesizers that are built from like little bitty modules like Lego bricks or like guitar pedals, if you're familiar with those. And Ornament and Crime was this module for a modular synthesizer that was completely open source. The people who designed it did not manufacture it at all. They partnered with other people that were more into the manufacturing side to get it made, right? And they had like full specs of like what you should do to manufacture it, which I think is really cool. And then like a lot of synthesizer modules, like for modular synthesis, will be like completely analog, but some of them are like hybrid analog digital, and that's what this one is. It has like a little computer in it, right? A little like I think it's a teensy, right? And it can run different programs. So they like documented their whole SDK and everything, and like basically like made a couple of programs themselves when they released it. But then like the community kind of organized around that, where it's like, okay, like you can get it from a bunch of different distributors, a bunch of different companies, and then a bunch of different people are making programs for it and hacking on it and giving it new features, right? So like that was like so compelling to me, was seeing a project like that where I'm like, okay, like that's what I'm into. Like I love seeing like a community forming around this project in two different ways. One where it's like a community of people who are making it, and then there's a community of people who are using it and changing it and making new like programs for it. And I think that's really, really powerful. It's another thing that I think about with like the Voron community, where they have a kind of a similar setup where it's like, oh, like there's a whole like ecosystem of vendors and people doing software stuff with like Clipper and so on, right? Like it's kind of incredible.
Voron does a really stellar job of letting people of various skill sets like collaborate. Like I think about I believe it's the Euclid probe that uses eddy current. That thing's incredible. And like someone will be like, hey, I made this thing, and then others will take it and run and integrate it into like the 70 different tool head mounts you need. And then firmware engineers will just be like, okay, it's added to Calico and Clipper, and here you go.
Yeah.
And then another cool example is LumenPnP. And Thea, you started out here as just an open source contributor to the project. So like, what was that like for you?
Yeah. So obviously I came into it because I was super interested in the idea of having my own pick and place machine, right? Like for similar reasons that like Steven enumerated in his first video about it, which I saw, by the way. Like I was there from the beginning. I'm a true OG. And like, seeing Steven iterate on some of the designs was like really inspiring to me as I was building my own open hardware stuff, right? So yeah, so like when Steven was like, I'm going to put together a Discord for this, who wants to hop on? Yeah, like obviously I was interested. I wanted to keep tabs on the project. I think what made it stick a little bit more for me compared to other projects was A, I really wanted this machine to exist. But B, like Steven was always like every video that he released, every time that he went out there and talked about this project, he was always talking about how someone in his comments, someone in his Discord, or someone emailed him, or someone sent him a physical letter that said like, hey, I saw you were doing this thing. You could do it this way and it might be better. And it was so cool to see how fast and how open Steven was to like feedback and incorporating that into his design and iterating on it. Especially like in those early days where like Steven was really kind of exploring the problem space and seeing what might be possible. That was really cool. And I like how he encouraged people to share alternatives and other ideas. There's a lot of projects out there, especially when it comes to people who make videos about their projects, where it's like, no, this is a thing that's done and you don't get to have any opinion about it, right?
Yeah.
So like that was really, really cool to me. It's like, I kept tabs on things. And then once I got my hands on the kit, right? Like when I saw Steven start Opula, I'm like, I'm pre-ordering that thing the second it goes up. I want to play with it, right? Like I want to be in on the ground floor of this. I want to see what this thing can do and how I can break it. And like putting it together, giving feedback, it was very like encouraging and like a positive feedback loop to like give feedback on Discord or wherever and have Steven and you respond to it and be like, hey, like, yeah, we feel you. We'll get that fixed. Or like encouraging me to like go and fix it myself, right? As that kind of evolved and I started making my own sort of mods to the machine, like the linear rail stuff. And the fact that like throughout the entire process, y'all were encouraging and welcoming and accommodating without being like condescending or like shutting down any conversation that didn't end up being something that's worthwhile upstream. As an example, I did a bunch of mods that made my first machine very weird, right? I did the whole split brain thing where I had a separate control board on the head. And like, that was one of the things where it's like, that's obviously not something that y'all are going to pull upstream anytime soon because it's such a big shift in how the machine is made and how it runs, right? And I knew that, right? But like when I'm sharing my progress on this in the Discord, it was never a moment where like you or Steven or anyone else was like, why are you sharing this? You're essentially making a fork, a derivative, right? Like, go away. Like that never happened, right? And then just also like you and Steven were very proactive in asking for help from the community.
Oh my God, we needed it.
Yeah, you needed it. That gave me the opportunity to step up for things that I was capable of helping out with. You're like, help, how do we docs? And I'm like, I know how you can docs. And like that sort of stuff, or like, questions about community engagement and things like that. I'm like, I can help. I know those things. I can help with those things. I didn't really start participating in the project with the expectation that I would ever get hired full time. It was kind of a chance thing that even happened. I'm glad it did, but like that wasn't the goal, right? I'm talking about my experience up until, last December when I got hired. Like I've only been an employee for 6 months. I would consider my experience as a contributor to the project pretty positive. And I think the things that we did well was being welcoming, having contributors step up and giving them the opportunity to actually do things is huge. If you want a community that's actually going to be engaged, start giving people tasks.
Yeah.
Don't tell them what to do. But you can think about it this way, right? You're throwing a party. You could either plan everything about your party yourself to the exact detail where your guests don't think about anything when it comes to the party, right? They just show up, they dance, they eat the food that you set out for them, and they leave, right? Or you can throw a party and you can tell everyone that you invited, hey, y'all bring whatever food you want. If you want some specific music, bring some music. If you want to, if y'all want to do a slip and slide, somebody bring a slip and slide. It's that sort of thing when you get people involved in it, when you get people to actually like do things, they feel much more ownership and sort of like power in a project, right? And I think that like empowering the people in your community is the best way to make your project feel more collaborative and more open, because you are actually making it more collaborative and more open. And sometimes people show up to the party, 30 minutes late, and you're like, all right, well, you didn't bring anything, but you could help with this thing, right? Like there's always something that needs to be done. And people are often eager to help, surprisingly, right? I mean, like, don't expect your community to do everything. In general, empower your community, right? Like if someone says, oh, I found an issue with the docs, don't just be like, okay, cool, we got it, we'll fix it later. You'd be like, okay, cool. If you want, you can file an issue. I can file an issue for you. If you want, you can fix it yourself, or we'll fix it, when it comes up in our backlog, right? You can give people all these options to contribute without burdening them with fixing things themselves.
Yeah, meeting people where they're at there is pretty important. And like, if we wanted to be real sticklers and only accept collaboration with people who have like an LFS setup, like local GitHub branch, and they merge correctly and they use our lock, like that'd be ideal, but we'd get half the contribution that we do.
Yeah, and it takes overhead to accept contributions, right?
Yeah.
But like you gotta ask yourself, is that what you want or not, right? Like
sometimes someone just sharing an idea in the Discord as a step file is just as valid a contribution as a PR. They're all valid.
Absolutely, right? I mean, a good example of this is even the mods that I did, like the linear rail mod. I did that. I published it myself. I did not submit a PR at all. I didn't even try to. I just put it out there on the Discord, and like we have a mods page that's literally just an editable, like a world editable Notion page, right? Anyone can drop their mod onto that. I have a collection on printables that I add mods to that you just ping me and I'll add your mod to it, right? There's no formal process for getting a mod published, right? And that's really cool because it lowers the barrier of entry, right? And if there is a really cool mod, we can shepherd that into the project ourselves. And that's exactly what you did with the linear rail mod. You reached out to me and you're like, hey, I want to pull this into upstream. Is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. And you did it. And you did it slightly differently and better, which is awesome. But like, that was really cool. It was also like, I felt great because like the thing that I did helped the project directly, right? Like it got upstreamed and that feels cool. Like it feels cool to like release a mod and then see other people do it. It feels even cooler for the project that you're contributing to be like, that's awesome. We're pulling it in, right?
Yeah, and it was a real honor to be able to like branch off from your design and make it better. And that's standing on your shoulders there. And like that really helps the project get a speed boost, is that collaboration.
Yeah, like I got you 90% of the way there and you had to do the other 90%, but you know.
Yeah, valid. And like it's really important to celebrate these people that share their ideas. Making people feel heard and appreciated is key. Like that's a part of the magic of this.
Absolutely. Celebrate everyone in your community, whether they contribute a full-on pull request that gets merged and you don't have to think about it, or they just drop a mod and say nothing else about it. They just drop an STL and disappear. Celebrate those people. They deserve it, right? Like they did a cool thing. Let them know that they did a cool thing. To give an interesting case study in the software world, I made a Python tool called Nox, right? NOX. Mm-hmm. And it's a testing tool, right? It's used to test multiple versions of Python. It's used to test your project against multiple versions of Python and stuff. And I made that while I was at Google, got it open sourced, all that stuff. And then like a lot of other people started using it. And I was very surprised by that, honestly. But like other people had ideas of how they wanted it to work. I could have just sat there and tried to implement every feature request myself slowly. Or people that were coming in and like leaving these feature requests were very detailed. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. If you send a pull request to add that, I'll merge it. That's basically what I said. I'm like, I would love to do this. I don't have time at the moment, but if you do, I got you. And what that led to is like people adding these features, but not only that, they would come back and they would add more stuff. And then like after like one or two pull requests, I'm like, hey, do you want to be a maintainer? Because you can be a maintainer. I would immediately add them to the README. Like you can go to Nox's docs page right now and you can see there's a list of people who contribute to it, who are maintainers. It's a lot of people. It's more than you would expect for such a small project. And like, it was important to me to give people that power as fast as possible. I was still around to like check releases and make sure nobody was putting in something obviously terrible. But like, if someone else wants to have the keys and be able to review pull requests so I don't have to do it, that's awesome. For the last like couple of years of releases of Nox, I have written zero code for that project. All I do is write the release notes. And in fact, the last release, I didn't even write the release notes. I finally gave that up to another contributor. That was the only thing I was holding on to. And it's like, empower your community, because if you do, they'll be able to take things in directions and broaden the project in a way that you never, ever expected. Celebrate them. Put their name front and center on like the README, or put them on the hardware, right? Like that's really cool.
Oh yeah.
I think that's super important. And it's something like with Winterbloom that we did as well. Winterbloom was my hardware company, my synthesizer company. Our community gave us so much good feedback when we were designing things and testing things. And every time we release something, you can go to the manual, you can scroll to the bottom of the manual, and there is a list of things of like, these are the people that help make this possible. And like, I was very, very specific about including everybody who contributed even a little bit to that. Cause it's huge. It makes something feel like, this isn't the Steven show. This isn't the Steven and Lucy show. It's Steven, Lucy, Thea, and a bunch of other people that have done so much stuff. Like we have so many contributors in our community that are just incredible and coming up with really neat ideas and cool stuff. We have to celebrate it, right? And that's how we make cool communities.
Oh, yeah. I think Winterbloom was a early inspiration for us was like just how clear your documentation was for the products and like onboarding and like how to modify and hack your thing. Like Ojai took a lot of reference from your like setup docs. Like they were master classes in user docs.
Yeah, I have such a weird feeling about that because so I spent 6 years at Google doing developer relations, right, which involves a lot of engineering and a lot of technical writing. So when people are like, "Oh, your docs are really good," I'm like, "Well, they better be," right? Like, this is what I did professionally for 6 years. I better be really good at this, right? Like, it would be like being an Olympic skier, and then you do some kind of skiing race, and you like come in second place, and someone's like, "Wow, you did really good." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been doing this. Yeah, I've been doing this a long time. I should be good at it, right?" I'm always happy to hear that people like the docs, but also it just kind of feels like that's the bare minimum I could do is make them good, right? Like, but yeah, like it's one of those things where it's like the community is going to do what you make affordances for the community to be able to do, right? If you set up your community in a way that makes it easy to get up to speed with what's going on, that makes it easy to share ideas, that makes it easy to share changes and modifications, even without upstreaming them, that makes it easy to collaborate with other people, then that is what the community is going to do. Like, it's like desire paths, right? Whatever desire paths that you kind of carve for your community, that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to get into. And if you make it easy for your community to be jerks, then your community is going to be a bunch of jerks, right? Like, there's a fantastic post by a friend of mine, Aja Hammerly, called "We Don't Do That Here." And for those of you who are trying to put together an open source community or any community, read this. You have to read this, because the thesis here is that you have to be active in shaping the tone and just the vibe of the community that you are trying to build. So if you build a community and it starts with 5 people and everyone's mean and sarcastic to each other, but y'all like each other, so it's all cool. When new people come in, they're going to be kind of off-put by that, right? But if you build a community and, even if you might be, mean and sarcastic with your friends or whatever, and you're used to that, but you're in your community, it's like, no, we try to be welcoming, then that's what's going to happen. And Aja has this really interesting phrase that she uses called "We don't do that here," which is supposed to be a gentle way of saying, hey, if someone's being kind of off with their vibes, you can tell them, hey, we don't do that here. You think about a community where you come in, a newcomer comes in, they ask a question that's been asked 1,000 times and someone's mean to them. You're like, hey, we don't do that here. And then you can also think about, why is someone coming in and asking a question a problem in the community anyway, right? What can we do better to make that A, not annoy existing people in the community, but B, also support newcomers better, right?
Yeah,
so.
You have to balance between the fact that a lot of people don't read the docs, and also if they're asking a question, it's because something failed them.
Yeah. I mean, the golden rule about technical writing is that nobody reads. That is rule 0 of technical writing, is that nobody reads. I say nobody reads. Nobody reads until they have to, right? Until they absolutely have to. And that's usually when something has gone wrong. There's a lot to be said about you can write beautiful documentation, but you can't make anyone read it.
Oh, no. Go back to what you said earlier. I remember the early 2000s internet forums for Nerf blaster modification were a cesspool. The admins were mean. They were snarky. All these people are retired from the hobby now. But they just make you feel like junk if you posted substandard to the mission guidelines, and people would just rag on each other. And it led to a splintering of the community, and it just create all these other websites and forums when the hobby was honestly too small to have 10 different forums for talking about DIY Nerf blasters.
Yeah, it is that classic meme of people who have been in a hobby for a long time just being mean to people who are new to the hobby, and then being like, hey, why aren't people picking up this hobby? And it's well, everyone who's in it is mean. Try to make sure that your community does not end up like that, because it's not fun for anyone.
Yeah, it's a great way to build a decentralized community.
Yeah. If you purposely fracture your community into experts and newcomers, it's going to be interesting, right? One of the things that I kind of have mixed feelings about is there is a Python subreddit, and then there's a Learn Python subreddit. Similarly, there's an electronics subreddit and an Ask Electronics subreddit, especially in the latter case with the electronics one. The moderator is like just anti any newcomer stuff in r/electronics and like forces any kind of questions or anything that he even considers not something that an expert would talk about. He forces it into Ask Electronics, which is like really gross because the people who can answer the question probably aren't looking at the other forum, right? And like that is a little discouraging for a lot of people. I say a little, it's probably a lot discouraging for a lot of people.
Yeah. Walled gardens can upset me. And like, that's where I get a little defiant. But I see how they got there. It's tough.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, like you can understand the motivation, right? But sometimes it goes a little too far where it's like, oh, no one can ask questions now.
Yeah, I do my best to like read someone's like all of their publications and like articles before I ask them a question. And it depends on the person whether or not that's needed. And often like people love answering questions. It's hit or miss.
Yeah, there's going to be grumpy people in your community, right? Like any community of a certain size is going to have some grumps. A community is not those grumpy people are important to the community. They often do contribute really interesting things or have very interesting perspectives or ideas, but also they aren't the people that grow the community. So, think about how you empower the people in your community that are excited to answer questions, excited to talk about new ideas, excited to talk about the project and be involved, right? That's the kind of people you want to lift up.
Yeah. And in lifting people up and like getting excitement around an open source project, I think it's really important that there's transparent roadmaps and like documented decision making so that things aren't relitigated. People can contribute towards the same goal instead of just scattering all over the place towards different aspects of a project.
Or yeah, if they want to retread something, they know that they're doing it on their own terms, right? Like they know what the expectations are. And y'all did something like this with the design decisions documentation, right?
Yes.
Like tell me a little bit about that.
That came from the constant debate around the feeder slots on the LumenPnP having one-wire EEPROM chips. People were insistent that there has to be a better way. Surely you don't need $51 EEPROM chips across the LumenPnP. And so much of the discourse in our community was just lost in the sauce. And like we wrote up a design decision documentation that said why we did it that way and the justifications, the pros and cons. And we acknowledged the other suggestions that were valid, and I believe we even talked about why we didn't go that route. And at that point, like it kind of like put out the fire and it let people focus on more interesting things, in our opinion. And if someone wants to go off and do it another way, they at least know why it started the way it did. It was really handy.
That's a really cool idea. I think, especially when it comes to a hardware project, there's always going to be someone coming in and saying like, you should do it this way instead, right? If you look at like open source synthesizer stuff, someone's always going to come in and be like, you shouldn't have used that filter. You should have used this filter instead. And it's like, for a lot of like sound electronics, it's like, it's what you like. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's all to taste, right? Like we're making chips make noises, right? Like it's even stuff that works kind of bad. People like, oh, that sounds interesting though. So I want to keep that, right? So it's like, people always have a different idea, a different way of doing things. So like documenting the design decisions, I think is so interesting. I like how like that kind of encourages the community to kind of focus on the next thing, on something else. And if someone is really into it and really wants to figure out something else, like they know that like, okay, this is settled in the project and I have to come up with something significantly better for the project to accept it. But if I want to explore the other solutions, I can do that. Just like setting expectations of what's going to be, possibly brought into the broader project, I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
I love projects when they say like, this is what this project is not.
Yeah.
I love when I see that. That's like one of the things I did with KeyCanvas as well. So KeyCanvas is a web renderer for KeyCAD files, so for PCB and schematic files. One of the first questions I started getting where people were like, are you going to port KeyCAD to the web? And I'm like, no. Under no circumstances will I be porting KeyCAD to the web browser. I'm literally just making a viewer. This is read only. You can change nothing. And like, I am explicit about that. This is not what this project is for. This project is for read only, just for viewing. And like, setting that expectation is so important. It tells people what to expect, right? And if someone wants to port KiCad to the web, they can do that. And they don't have to worry about stepping on my toes because I'm not going to do it.
I find the easiest way to avoid someone getting upset is to manage expectations. And by you saying what, you're not going to create false hope. You're going to make people excited about what you're doing and let the focus be on that excitement. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think a lot of like kind of not intentionally bad experiences with communities and open source projects come from just not having good expectations, right? Like not having clear expectations, right? You know, there's the often cited case of like the XKCD comic of the internet's held up by like some tiny library maintained by some random person in the middle of nowhere, right? And like they just work on it in their free time. When something goes wrong, a bunch of people pile in and are like, hey, I have this bug. You need to fix this bug. And it's like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Setting expectations when it's like, okay, this is a one-person project that is a hobby. So you have no line of support. If you want to fix something in it, do it yourself, right? There's like setting that expectation. And then when it comes to a project like LumenPnP, where it's like, no, we are selling this and we support it. And, you know, if you want to collaborate, here's the areas that are good to collaborate with, right? Like, I think that's really awesome, is setting those expectations correctly. So when people do ask for something that's outside the realm of expectation, they can understand why it's not. Because a lot of people are like, why did they tell me no? And it's like, it's not you. Sometimes it's just like, that's just not what we're here for. We don't have an army of engineers, right? We don't have a core of engineers.
Yeah.
Well, we've kind of completely gone off script and rambled for a while just about open source and how cool it is to be a part of a community. So as we wrap things up on this episode, I would love to call out some cool projects that people are working on that we think you should check out and maybe contribute to.
Yeah, one of my favorites is FreeCAD. I gotta say. The LumenPnP is actually featured on the splash screen of the 1.0 release of FreeCAD, and it's such an honor. It's been really cool watching Steven be a part of the FPA, the FreeCAD Project Association, seeing like Steven help steward the direction of FreeCAD as an advisor to it. It's really given me a view of like how thoughtful they are as a community. And it's one of my favorite open source projects to date on the software front. Alongside that, there's Inventory. It's such a thoughtful group of developers.
Inventory is awesome.
Yeah.
So is FreeCAD, but Inventory is awesome.
And then, Thea, I'm sure you got a bunch that deserve a shout out.
I mean, I want to call out the KiCad project is such a foundational project in what we do in open hardware. And there are so many ways to contribute. So like, I would encourage, like, if you use KiCad, if you're into that kind of stuff, maybe check out contributing to the KiCad library. There's always things to do in the KiCad library. And it's such an easy way to contribute. I say easy. It's a relatively easy way to contribute. You don't have to know like C++ or anything to contribute to it. And the library maintainers are nice people and are doing incredible work. There's a lot of human work that goes behind when you pull up, you know, KiCad for the first time and add a part. There's a whole bunch of parts in there already. Another one that I'll shout out is CircuitPython. If you are relatively new to programming or relatively new to hardware, like the CircuitPython community is so awesome. I'm technically still a maintainer, even though I've not contributed any code in like several years, but I believe the maintainers are just wonderful people and the community is really great. And it's just such a helpful and just positive group of people to interact with. So those are two that I would really like encourage people to check out. And both of them are not so big like the Linux kernel that they're just daunting to even approach.
And as an end user of CircuitPython, I gotta say, I love how approachable they make microcontrollers and programming. It's really cool what they do.
The first hardware product I released ran CircuitPython. That's
rad. That's really cool.
Yeah. In a very big way, they made it possible for me to do what I was doing. So, yeah.
All right, folks, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us out a ton. You can learn more about Opulo at opulo.io, as well as YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can email us at podcast@opulo.io with questions or comments on the episode. To keep up to date with the podcast and Opulo, sign up for our newsletter where we write blog posts and conduct customer interviews with other folks building open hardware. That's it, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Meow. Welcome to Taco Bell.
Yeah, I love Taco Bell.